What will happen in 2026 will leave the world in shock. Edgar Cayce predicted it all, decades in advance, and his warnings are now coming true. The humble beginning of a prophet. He never wore a suit of power. He didn't stand on stages or demand attention. Edgar Cayce was a quiet man born into a humble farming family in Kentucky in 1877. He worked as a photographer, spoke softly, prayed often, and lived a life that most would call ordinary. But within him, something extraordinary was unfolding. Something that neither he nor the world was ready to understand. Cayce didn't study in big universities. He wasn't a doctor, a scientist, or a priest. Yet, from a young age, he showed signs that his soul walked closer to the divine than most. As a boy, he claimed to see visions, images, and voices that didn't belong to this world. The sleeping prophet awakens. He was called the sleeping prophet, a man who saw the future, not with his eyes, but through visions that came in silence. While the world slept, Edgar Cayce closed his eyes and entered a realm beyond time, a place where past, present, and future met in one eternal moment. And from that mysterious dimension, he spoke of things the world could not yet understand. He saw continents sink. He saw seas rise. He saw the earth tremble, not in rage, but in remembrance. And he left behind a warning that the year 2026 would mark a turning point for the planet. The gift that defied logic. What if I told you that a man who passed away in 1945 accurately foresaw events with precision that continues to baffle researchers today? Edgar Cayce. The mere mention of his name sends chills down the spine of anyone familiar with prophecy. Dubbed the Sleeping Prophet, this humble individual from Kentucky became one of the most extensively documented psychics in history. However, Cayce was not just a carnival fortune teller. He was a devoted Christian, a photographer, and a Sunday school instructor. Yet when he entered his trance state, he tapped into knowledge that defied all logic. The extraordinary visions. It was during moments of deep sleep, what he called his trance state, that the revelations began. With his eyes closed and his body still, Cayce would speak with clarity about things he could not possibly know. Illnesses he had never seen, places he had never visited, events that had not yet happened. His family was the first to be both amazed and frightened. Friends became unsure. Some said he was possessed. Others believed he was chosen. What made Cayce different wasn't only what he saw, but the peace, the conviction, and the love with which he spoke. The power of his predictions. He foresaw the stock market crash of 1,929 years before it happened. He predicted the outbreak of World War II. He spoke of the shifting poles, of melting ice caps, of volcanoes reawakening in forgotten places. He even warned of a time when the earth shall be broken open in many places, when coastlines would change and waters would move in ways unseen since the dawn of man. And among his hundreds of prophecies, one date stood out like a beacon: 2026. He called it the beginning of the Great Purification. The terrifying accuracy. Between 1901 and 1944, Edgar Cayce provided over 14,000 readings while in a self-induced sleep state. These were not vague forecasts. They were intricate, specific, often medical in nature, and meticulously recorded by stenographers. The Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach still maintains these records. Scientists, medical professionals, and researchers have been examining them for years. His accuracy rate, as shown by statistical analysis, suggests it could not have been mere coincidence. The Great Awakening of the Waters. To most people of his time, the oceans were just vast and silent, but to Edgar Cayce, they were alive, and one day they would speak. In several of his trance readings, he described the Great Awakening of the Waters, a mysterious movement beneath the surface of the earth that would signal the beginning of profound global change. At the time, this sounded poetic, perhaps even dramatic. But now, nearly 100 years later, scientists are witnessing oceanic behavior that mirrors Cayce's warnings with unsettling precision. The oceans begin to speak. He spoke of currents shifting, tides rising without cause, and the seas acting as if they were being stirred from below. Today, oceanographers have confirmed that certain deep-sea regions, once considered geologically stable, are experiencing pressure changes, temperature anomalies, and unexplained activity. Tsunamis, once rare, are becoming more frequent and unpredictable. Coastal cities are reporting tidal surges that arrive without warning, and in places that were calm for centuries, the water now moves with force. The hidden message of 2026. Among the more than 14,000 readings given by Edgar Cayce, one specific message was kept hidden longer than most. It wasn't spoken to the public. It wasn't printed in newspapers or read from a pulpit. It was quietly recorded in 1934 during one of Cayce's deep trances and locked away by the very foundation that was created to protect his work. What he saw was too powerful, too terrifying, and possibly too close to the truth. The rupture of 2026. In that reading, Cayce described the mid-2020 seconds as a turning point for the Earth. He named the year 2026 as a time when the world would experience a rupture, not only in the land beneath our feet, but in the hearts of humankind. He said the planet would shake from within and that the oceans would rise in fury. He spoke of the sun losing its warmth, of skies turning strange colors, and of a silence falling across the world that would leave people stunned and afraid. The shift of the axis. For most of history, people have believed the Earth was steady, constant, dependable. It spun, it tilted. The seasons came and went, and everything remained in balance. But Edgar Cayce saw something different. In his trance readings, he warned of a time when the Earth's axis would shift, not slightly, but enough to affect the balance of life on the planet. He said the Earth would be shaken from its very foundation, and that this movement would not only alter the environment, but shake the soul of every human being. The scientific confirmation. At the time, it seemed impossible. But today, scientists have confirmed that the Earth's axis is indeed shifting. Slowly, almost invisibly, the North Pole is moving. Researchers now link this to the melting of the polar ice caps, which is causing a redistribution of the planet's mass. Cayce said exactly this decades ago, that the ice will leave the poles and seek balance elsewhere. This tilt, however subtle, affects far more than geography. It disrupts climate systems, ocean currents, agricultural seasons, and even animal migration patterns. The lands that will survive. For all the destruction Edgar Cayce foresaw, the shifting lands, the rising seas, the global fear, he also saw something else. Refuge. He believed that while much of the Earth would be shaken, some places would remain surprisingly untouched. Not because of luck or geography, but because of a deeper spiritual protection. Cayce said these places would serve a divine purpose. They would become sanctuaries not only of survival, but of healing and leadership in a broken world. The safe zones revealed. In his readings, he named specific regions where the energy of the Earth would remain stable, and where a spiritual awakening would begin after the Great Purging. One of the most significant places he mentioned was South America, particularly Brazil. But he didn't speak only of Brazil. He also described Canada's interior, the peaceful lands of New Zealand, and portions of inland Africa away from the coasts, as places where people would be guided not only by logic, but by love, humility, and prayer. The final warning. Edgar Cayce never ended his readings with fear. Even when he spoke of earthquakes, swallowing cities, or darkness covering the skies, he always left space for something greater: hope. He believed that after the fall, a rebirth would come. Not just for the Earth, but for the soul of humanity. In his vision, the chaos wasn't meaningless. The disasters were not without purpose. Cayce described a purification, a breaking down of false foundations, so that something true and lasting could rise in their place. The choice before us. He said that what was coming, the storms, the darkness, the shifting Earth, was not the end but the beginning of something greater. A time of correction, a time of return. And in nearly every reading that touched on these coming days, he always offered a message that was more important than any prediction. Do not fear what comes. Fear living without faith. For Cayce, the real disaster was not in the oceans or the sky. It was in the hearts of those who forgot God. The message of faith. He said that when the ground breaks and the sky dims, many will look for help in machines, in governments, in science. But those who survive with strength will be the ones who kneel, not panic. Pray, not blame. Love, not hate. Cayce often repeated that prayer is not just words but action. A life of truth, humility, compassion, and surrender. The strongest prayer, he once said, is not from the lips, but from the hands that help and the hearts that forgive. The future, he warned, will test everyone, but those who walk with God will pass through fire and not burn, through flood and not drown, through silence and still hear his voice. In the end, it won't be the rich, the powerful, or the clever who lead the way. It will be the faithful, those who believed even when all seemed lost. Because what's coming is not the end. It's the beginning of a new world built not on fear but on faith.